topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately, and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Most leaders are sitting on untapped human energy, and I help them unlock it. I'm an organizational psychologist, logotherapist, workforce advisor, and the founder of the Gusto Now movement. But the title I live by is really much simpler. I traffic in energy. Not the surface level motivation or another engagement initiative, but the deeper force, what I call gusto, the life force for performance that drives commitment, perseverance, and genuine ownership of a shared mission in the clients we serve. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or visit my personal site, elisecortez.com, for information on speaking and my books. Today we have with us Dr. Rabbi Baruch HaLevi. He is a trained logotherapist, men's coach, Enneagram teacher, and spiritual guide who helps men rediscover who they are, why they're here, and how to live it fully. With doctorates in counseling and divinity and over 2 decades of experience guiding people through grief, loss, and transformation, Dr. HaLevi bridges psychology, spirituality, and coaching through Viktor Frankl's meaning-centered approach. He's the author of Spark Seekers, Mourning with Meaning, and The Guy in the Glass, 6 Questions to See the Man You Are Meant to Be. And he hosts the podcast 13 Minutes, Why Every Man Needs a Why. Through his men's coaching and men's peer groups, he helps men rise into purpose, connection, and authentic brotherhood. We'll be talking today about the points from his book, The Guy in the Glass, and specifically address the problems men face with their mental health, cover off on the 6 questions from the book, and then hear about his own dark night in the woods story that radically changed him in the direction of his life. He joins us from Denver. Dr. Baruch HaLevi, welcome back to Working on Purpose.
Hey, Dr. Elise, thanks for having me. It's always an honor.
Absolutely. And let me first just celebrate this beautiful thing you brought into the world. You know, I've talked about this before. I've had children. You have not. This is harder. Harder to bring this into the world than it is a child. So way to go, B. And listeners and viewers, you'll get to know that he has a very big, beautiful, fancy name. But those of us who know him and love him, just call him B. And you will too. So now that we've given some levity to the show, B, let's get into the meat of this. I was shocked to learn this stat from you in your book, that every 13 minutes, a man takes his life by suicide. And so you host that podcast called 13-Minute Mission, Why Every Man Needs a Why, to address this very tragedy. And of course, so when you think about that, in an hour, more than 4 men have perished.
Yeah, by the time this episode closes, I guess that means 3 men will have chosen to die by suicide. And I have a simple mission, Elise. That is to push back the clock 1 minute. That means 2,888 men this year alone will choose life. If we can help them, as our teacher and mentor Viktor Frankl says, discover and live their why. A man who has a why does not choose to leave this world. That's my mission, called the 13-Minute Mission, and that's what we're doing.
Well, of course, you are uniquely qualified. There's a reason you are so riveted on this subject of men's suicide and are uniquely equipped to address it. I knew about your father's suicide when he was 60 and you were 34. And the way you describe it in the book, B, is so incredibly powerful and really puts us into that seat. And then, of course, your grandmother took her own life some 20 years before that. Amazing to draw from and to be riveted by.
Yeah, I do believe God gives us the curriculum that we need, not what we want. And I was put into this life to, as Viktor Frankl says, transform that tragedy into other people's triumph. And didn't want the curriculum, but I got it. And so here we are. I wrote a book on really kind of documenting it and laying out a plan of how we're going to effectuate this mission and not put an end to suicide, but certainly defy the clock.
One thing I want to celebrate about you, as I mentioned to you, you and I have been friends for several years, and we met each other because we did our logo philosophy diplomates, which is a master's level degree together. That's how we met I think it was 6-7 years ago. But I learned a lot more about you in this book. I love the fact that you call yourself a recovering rabbi and a spiritual mutt. And I love that you can draw on the wisdom of all these different spiritual traditions in what you do. And you're wicked funny, B. Oh my God, I was laughing and I was, crying, and I was just like, but then I was so impressed that you have really done something. Well, one thing that I also love about your book is that it's just piercingly raw. It's achingly real, which is you down to the core. But then you do this beautiful thing, B. Listeners and viewers, this is why you got to pick up the book. You do this thing where you're weaving together a parable, a guidebook, and a memoir all into one powerful experience. I was really blown back by how clever this is and how powerful it is.
I'm so glad you appreciate it. A couple of my good friends said it's like Dr. Seuss for grownups.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm not sure that
Exactly.
they said it as eloquently as you, but look, I like paradox, and it opens up with a pretty gruesome scene of my father taking his life, and it was necessary to do that, and it also juxtaposes that against Viktor Frankl's survival out of the Holocaust. And so that I can't think of two heavier topics than the Holocaust and suicide. Oh, this is going to be a fun book. And so I juxtapose it with I think a pretty fun ride. The guy walks into a bar, a lot of sort of trippy plant medicine kind of experience in there. Not sure what's real, what's not, but I really wanted to have it humorous, light, as well as deep and painful.
Well, so let's just quickly introduce a little bit of it. So I really appreciate that. Well, let's also say, and again, your work with men, your work coaching men and, men's peer groups, et cetera, so powerful, being able to surface this really painful stuff in life. The book starts though, because you've had an argument with your wife and she's like, go figure your shit out. And so she takes the kids on the trip and you're going to go, camping, but you decide to stop by the bar, and the barmaid, Neshama, if I'm saying her name right,
You did.
she's really, a strong catalyst in this, and she's a central figure in how she serves up these questions and how she curates the conversations and the men that flow through the door to echo them or to serve them as well. So I just want to situate that for our listeners and viewers. It's really expert how you weave that all through.
Well, thank you. I just draw upon wisdom traditions, whether it's logotherapy or Kabbalah or other, as you said, I'm a spiritual mutt. So I got a lot of traditions, great traditions that have come before me. And so this is just a spiritual principle. She represents the divine feminine. And the men that I do work with at midlife are ready to embrace their divine feminine, to learn from it. And so it's a guy at midlife, and it's almost like she's like the queen bee, and they're sort of hovering around the hive, and she's calling the shots, but letting them find their way. And I just really do believe it's a spiritual principle that makes that work.
Thank you for saying that. I didn't catch that she was the divine feminine energy. I just saw her as kind of a catalyst, sort of a wise sort of sage. So I love that nuance in there too. Amazing.
Yeah. I had to really decide what this book wasn't, because I was trying to be all things to everybody. That's why it took me so long. First it was memoir. Next it was a fictional narrative. And next it was a teaching on the Enneagram, a logotherapy handbook. And the editor said, like, dude, you got to kind of consolidate it. And so I made some choices, and some of it becomes implicit. I'll give you one little sort of behind the scenes. There's 6 chapters. There's 6 kind of different types of men that show up in each chapter, and they're based on the Enneagram, which is another love of mine. And so each one represents an Enneagram, which is, for your listeners, kind of like a personality roadmap. And so they're the 6 fundamental. There's really 9 Enneagram types, but I boil it down to 6. And so there's lots of hidden motifs and fun things behind there. And I'd like to think that it's readable now.
I didn't catch that either. Now I have to go back and read it again and find that, because I'm an Enneagram freak as well. I'm a 7 enthusiast. You're an 8, the challenger. So now I got to go back and read it again. Happy to do that. Thanks, Pete.
Chapter 3, I think, is the Enneagram 7, but you'll figure it out.
Okay. Thanks for the little tip. Okay, so I thought it was profound that your grandfather gave you the guy in the glass poem, and obviously the impact on you is incredible. I had never encountered that poem before, and I don't know that we need to read the whole thing, but if you want to situate a little bit about what the poem is about and why it was so profoundly impactful for you.
Yeah, it was written in 1934 by a man named Dale Wimbrow, and he was writing it in response to a young reader who was writing into the American Mercury magazine. He was struggling with a moral business dilemma, and poem was the response to the young reader, and it's all about going to the mirror, the guy in the glass, and it's written in 1934 language, so it's a little archaic, but I think to me, it makes it meaningful. It kind of reminds me of my grandfather, kind of reeks of grandfatherly wisdom. And so it was appropriate. My grandfather gave it to me later because I was that young man in my life. And he saw me going off sort of crossing moral lines, or, just the 20-something version of me. He gave me this poem. And I also think he watched my dad, that was his son-in-law, very much going off the rails. And this is a poem about going to the mirror. And at the end of the day, if you don't respect the guy or the gal staring back from the glass, then you have nothing. And the men that I work with in particular have spent their entire life learning to be whatever everybody else wants them to be, and learning to climb the ladders of success, as it says, to find is leaning against the wrong wall. And they don't respect the guy in the glass. And so you have nothing if you don't have him.
Mm. And I appreciate how you share in the book that I forget which character it is that can't actually look into the mirror, can't look into the mirror. It's not ready to see himself.
It's not actually a character. It's about 20% of the men that I give this assignment to. And I give it this, I call mirror work or mirror moments. I tell them to go to the mirror and look at themselves, and not like, just comb your hair, but to, that was a joke. But it was to look yourself in the eyes, to stare. And so many men, maybe women too, I don't know, I haven't done it with women, can't do it. They won't do it. It's heartbreaking to hear somebody can't look at themselves in the eyes. Mm-hmm. It's a reality.
Mm-hmm. There was just so much in there. As I told you, I've a couple of dear male friends that I've already got copies of the book for, because there's so much in there that I know they'll really appreciate on their own journey of learning and growing and trying to understand themselves and accept themselves and celebrate themselves. So, and what I appreciate too about this work, B, is that, when we help more men heal, everybody needs to heal. There's not a single human walking the planet that isn't walking wounded.
Yeah.
And when we help more men heal, we help so much of the world get better simultaneously. And I just really appreciate that work.
Yeah, I've gotten challenged a bit by my female audience or friends or family who said, why did you not write it for women? I say, I did write it for women because you have a father, son, husband, brother, colleague, boss, employee, and better men, as you just described, make a better world. I mean, if you look at a good percentage of our problems, I don't think it's a stretch to say involve a Y chromosome. So if we can help those with the Y chromosome, we help those with X chromosome too.
100%, maybe 1,000%. I also noticed I got more, just so you know, B, I got some more insight even into some of the men in my life that I've been close to, and I better understand those choices and some of those reactions, which is where I want to go to next. You and I both being Viktor Frankl fans that's the creator of, the logo philosophy, logotherapy, for listeners and viewers, if you don't know that. But of course, he warns that when reaction becomes a way of life, freedom fades. So when we're driving our lives and we start to be driven by emotion, fear, et cetera, now we lose all this choice and this freedom. And so I appreciate, again, that you're talking about how we can free ourselves from what you and I think Dr. Viktor Frankl called the inner concentration camp. And if that doesn't just help you relate to that world, I can relate to that world.
Well, I don't use the term lightly. I have written all over my body in tattoos, family members' numbers who were murdered in the Holocaust. So it's personal to me. I am a rabbi. And I'm a student of Viktor Frankl's. I wear his number, 119104, on my arm. And so I don't use that term lightly because I've been challenged on it before. That's reserved for the special, unique. No, it's not, because my father was in a concentration camp. How do I know? Because he sentenced himself to death. And if that's not a concentration camp, then I don't know what we're talking about. And his world became riddled with self-accusation and hatred and condemnation, and sounds very similar like a Holocaust, like a Nazi concentration camp. And to a person in suffering, there's no distinction. And so I take it very seriously, and my job is really to help people break out of those concentration camps.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about 2B, but one of the reasons that I am so drawn to logotherapy, logophilosophy, is that to me, it's empowering, right? And so you talk about it in your book that, to react as ordinary, to respond, to react as ordinary, to respond, that's different, is extraordinary. And it is the mark of the man who has met his own soul and refused to bow before circumstance. Frankl called this the defiant power of the human spirit, the capacity to face soul-crushing pain and still draw a line in the sand, declaring, I will choose who I become.
Amen, sister.
So powerful.
Yeah, all of Viktor Frankl's work, in my humble opinion, and certainly my life philosophy, comes down to his famous statement, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So between stimulus, things happening, I won't curse here, it's your show, and us reacting, there's a space. And that space, the question is what kind of space? Have we cultivated that space? Are we living in an expansive life, or are we living in that constriction, that narrowness of thinking, of feeling, of being in the world? And so when a person expands that space, they don't react. They start choosing their response. It's simple formula. It's not easy to do, but that's it. That's the
I 100% get it. Yeah, and I appreciate that, and continue to practice it myself. So it's a lifelong deal. Let's grab our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Rabbi Baruch HaLevi, who is a trained logotherapist, men's coach, Enneagram teacher, and spiritual guide who helps men rediscover who they are, why they're here, and how to live it fully. We've been talking about the real issue, the problem here of men's mental health, and just how tragic it can unfold. After the break, we're going to get into these 6 magical questions that B talks about in his book. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because people thrive and are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out, The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand today's discerning workforce and what do they want and need from you to be able to give their best. And then I provide you 22 best practices to equip that in your leadership and your culture. You can find my books on Amazon or elisecortez.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Dr. Rabbi Baruch B. HaLevi. He's the author of Spark Seekers, Mourning and Meaning, and the one we're talking about today, The Guy in the Glass, 6 Questions to See the Man You Could Be. He also hosts the podcast 13 Minutes, Why Every Man Needs a Why. So before we get into the questions, B, I think it's important, since so much of the audience that you serve are in the midlife part of their lives. I appreciate it very much and can relate myself that you talk about how midlife isn't a crisis, it's a reckoning. It's a shattering of identity, expectations, and the quiet loneliness of performing a life that no longer feels real or true.
Yeah, I believe deeply. You're not at midlife, but when you get to be my age, Elise, you'll know that it's an invitation. I really think we live in a youth-obsessed culture. I love this midlife juncture. I'm probably north of midlife. People always say midlife. It depends how long you live. But like, let's take the bell curve, the average. To me, it's like a 40 to 60 space in there of reimagining who are we? You have enough life experience, you have enough wins and losses, and you start to see through all the BS. And if you treat it as a reckoning and as an invitation, I think it becomes the most exciting time in life.
It certainly was for me. I wouldn't say it was fun. It was certainly very messy and very chaotic. But boy, what's emerged on the other side and continues to unfold is incredibly powerful.
I definitely wouldn't use the word fun, and I definitely wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But when you're in it, again, excitement, aliveness, vitality,
Totally.
That's where meaning is found on, the mountaintops and in the valleys. And it's all there in the midlife juncture.
It's chewiness for sure, man. That's for sure. Okay, so what I would love to do is we won't be able to treat all of these questions, and we shouldn't, because that's the purpose of the book and the usefulness of the book. But I would like to at least introduce the 6 if we can. And what I appreciated is when I first cracked open your book, I looked at the table of contents and I saw the questions. I went, those are, wait a minute, those are standard questions. What is he doing? I know B better than this. There must be more to it. So the first question is, what's your name?
I'm just going to correct you. They're not standard questions. They're bar questions. They're pickup
questions. Yeah. Okay. Bar questions. Yeah. They're everyday shallow conversations.
Shallow. It's the worst of the worst.
Yes.
What's your name? What do you do? Come here often. Are you single? What's your number? How are you getting home? And it does sound like a pickup line in a previous incarnation of this man at the bar, which is me. It's every man. It's every person. That every questions are not what they seem. Right? Nothing is what it seems. And if you want to go deeper, you can go deeper. And that's what this guy at the bar is finally doing in his life. His wife says, don't come back. My wife said, don't come back till you figure your shit out. That part is true. She says that pretty much every day when I go off to the office. You can take it seemingly ordinary and it becomes extraordinary. And that's what I love about it. And I also love that these are ancient wisdom teachings. I draw a lot from my religion of birth, Kabbalah, Judaism, and what's your name is the first question that's asked by Moses of God. What's your name? It's like a pickup line. What are you kidding me? This is a pickup line? No, it's actually a necessary starting point if you want intimacy with somebody, to know their name. And of course, it's not the name tag. It's not the name on the screen. And we dig into that in the chapter.
And I think if I have this right, I think one of the men that you talk about in the book, who, I think he's one of the men that his father tells him how he's worthless all the time, and just, what's his value kind of thing. And a lot of us get that, and certainly a lot of men get that too. And if I have this right, he, in his work with you and in the book, he decides and discovers that his name is I am worthy. Is that right?
Yeah, and it comes from what God's response to Moses. What is God going to say? Like G-O-D? It doesn't exist in the Bible. There's Hebrew, and it says Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, which means I am that I am. And so that principle is every time as a human being we say I am and we fill in the blank, we're making ourselves static, stuck, limited. And more often than not, they're not pretty descriptions. They're not liberating ideas, right? I'm stupid. I can't do that. I am this, I am that. And so the idea is, can we start expanding our consciousness, our identity? And that is a name beyond just, a little name tag.
Mm-hmm. Well, as an identity researcher, you know that you're speaking my love language. So I really, really appreciate the profundity of that and the work that I've gotten to do to help people expand their sense of identity and reject or remove some of those labels that they have spent their whole lives with that are so limiting and demeaning.
And almost always I say, to people, what's your name? And they tell me their first name. I say, that's your whole name? And they're like, yeah, that's it. Do you have a middle name? Do you have a last name? Do you have a maiden name? Do you have titles? Do your kids call you by your first name? Like, all of a sudden you realize we have so many pieces of our identity and we've just boiled it down to a little, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. And there's so much more there to that person. Just like there is in the second question. The second question is, what do you do?
This one's an interesting one because I've noticed it more in men. Maybe it's changed a bit, but I still think it's a very male-dominated, loaded question. what's your name? That's always the first question at a barbecue or a cocktail party. And then the next question, at least for men, is what do you do?
Mhm.
And they always say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm a whatever. I'll say to them now, because I just love disrupting cocktail parties. I didn't ask you how you make money. What do you do? And they just look at me like, what are you on? What are you talking about? You're a father, you're a husband, you're a son, you're a gardener, you're a poet, you're a basketball player. I didn't ask you how you pay the bills. But almost invariably, particularly men, tell me how they make money. That is a problem.
Years ago, B, I stumbled upon this idea, and part of it came because I live here in Dallas, Texas, and a lot of people, especially women, don't necessarily pursue work throughout their whole entire life. So it became awkward to ask, "What do you do?" For both men and women, but certainly women. So I devised the question of, "What do you pour yourself into that lights you up?" And I like that. Then people can say, sometimes they say that they love their work, but very often they're telling me about, the canvas of their lives, that all these things that matter to them, that are a part of them.
And that's where the question we needed to go. I just took it at sort of the base level and you raised it up. And that's the whole point, right? Can we raise our conversations up to, from the ordinary to the extraordinary?
And that's one of the many reasons I've always loved you, B, because you live on that beautiful level that is real and deep and chewy. And this is what the world needs, my friend. So we need more B.
Thank you.
Okay, so next question, and this cracks me up too. You're in the bar. What brings you here?
Right. Yeah, it starts in the chapter's called "Come Here Often," but then I translate that pretty quickly into what brings you here, and then it of course takes you into a deeper, not here the bar, here into this life, which takes us into, of course, our beloved teacher Viktor Frankl's life thesis: those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow. And you don't know how many times I ask guys, what's your why? And they look at me like, what do you mean? And then they start scrambling and they start grabbing basically Hallmark cards from the Hallmark store in their mind. And they start reading them off about, dad and a son and a husband and BS. Like, what's your why? What drives you? What lights you up and you want to pour yourself into, like you said? And so few people, they know it for their business. They know it for their profession or their religion. They don't know it for their life purpose.
One of the things that I thought was so powerful is in that chapter you feature Aaron, and he's so angry because his beloved wife Emily has died, and so you talk about how he was able to take all of that anger that of her leaving and feeling helpless and so sad into really more of a mission to help other people going through similar things. He found himself coming back to the same hospital that he'd gone to visit her, and was helping the people that were also visiting their loved ones. And I thought that was a really powerful depiction of just where purpose can come from.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to accomplish in this book and in my work is to help the world better understand men in particular. And that means all of them, not just the pretty parts, right? Not just the pleasing parts, not just the socially acceptable parts. In our society, you say somebody's a nice guy and it's a compliment, right? It's not a compliment. Being a nice guy it can be very hurtful, that person. And being angry is not a pejorative term, because Martin Luther King was angry, and Nelson Mandela was angry, and Winston Churchill were angry. Now they learned how to harness their anger and use it on purpose. And I meet so many men who have been made to feel or have felt bad, less than wrong for something like anger. No, what do you do with it? That determines the man.
Well, I can tell you, I've gotten a lot of shit done in my life on anger. I really have. So because it's energy, right? All of our emotions are energy in motion. And if we can learn what they're trying to tell us, what is it they're communicating to us, then we can do something with that in a more productive, effective fashion.
Yeah, reacting is never good. And so if you're reacting from anger, no. But if you're responding from anger, right, to bring justice,
yes,
coming from a place of harnessed anger.
Yes.
Again, Martin Luther King didn't, make his point by getting up there and being a nice guy.
Right.
He had a dream, and it was fiery, and he was channeled, and it moved the world.
Right. Amen. Okay, so let's grab number 4 here before we grab our next break here. So the next question, which cracks me up just thinking about this, you're in a bar and you would ask somebody, are you single?
Are you single? And the answer is yes or no. But the truth is, it's never no, right? Because we're only thinking about dating apps and we're only thinking, excuse me, from a shallow perspective. But not maybe my profile has been married for 27 years, but I have my kids, I have my friends, I have my community, and that's the point. Helping men, people in general, men and women, especially midlife. And this has come up a lot when I counsel people who've gone through divorce, who are now single. And we have to really challenge that. Who are you in relationship with? And it goes far beyond just, a marital status.
hmm I absolutely love, and from all the years I've known you, I love that you really helped me understand the idea of answering the question, who do you belong to?
Hmm.
So powerful.
Yeah, one of the challenges I see, I live in Denver, Boulder area, and it's pretty hippy dippy spiritual out here. And there is a lot of who am I kind of conversations and searching for it. And I do see the limits of that. Viktor Frankl said, if you really want to know who you are, figure out who you serve, self-transcendence. So it's not who am I, it's whose am I.
hmm hmm And I think that is such a powerful reframe because a lot of people, we have a loneliness epidemic, as you well know. We have a depression epidemic. And when you can start to see, one, there are so many people who you do belong to, who there's plural. And two, to your other point, when you just take a little bit of time, one moment to go and help somebody in something small, could be something very small, suddenly you're not focused on how you feel or feeling alone. You're part of something bigger than yourself.
Especially men, especially at midlife, who have only defined relationship, intimacy with a significant other, a partner. And, I'm very passionate about bringing men to true intimacy. Wayne Dyer teaches into me see, to see and to be seen. Can you be seen by another man in a platonic, loving relationship? Can you say, I love you? Can you have that connection? That saves lives.
hmm And just quickly to celebrate that, of course, your foreword is written by Dr. Dan Franz, who is a dear friend of both of ours. And even just the way he writes his foreword, listeners and viewers, is a direct expression of the love that Bea and Dan have for each other as brothers. And that's what I think is so beautiful. Your book opens with something that many men have probably never experienced.
Yeah, Dan and I are running now men's peer groups, and it's teaching men how to basically be in intimate relationships from this deeper soul level and to see and to be seen. And we got a break, but only two common threads I know in suicide is number one, loneliness, and number two, meaninglessness.
Mm-hmm.
And that issue solves both of them.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Let's let our listeners and viewers think about that as we grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Rabbi Baruch HaLevi. He is a trained logotherapist, men's coach, Enneagram teacher, and spiritual guide who helps men rediscover who they are, why they're here, and how to live it fully. We've been talking about four so far of the questions he talks about in his book. After the break, we're going to talk about the remaining two and then hear about his own story of his dark night in the woods. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As you know by now, this program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. I mentioned in the last segment that my book, The Great Revitalization, came out. What I did for you is I created a simple 3-page assessment that you can pull off my website, gusto-now.com, to help you determine the extent to which you are meeting the discerning needs of today's destination workplace desires. If you're just now joining us, my guest is Dr. Rabbi Baruch HaLevi. He's the author of Spark Seekers, Morning with Meaning, and The Guy in the Glass, 6 Questions to See the Man You Were Meant to Be. He also hosts the podcast 13 Minutes, Why Every Man Needs a Why. So let's cover off on the last 2 questions here in the book to give our listeners and viewers a flavor here. Favorite next question, number 5, is, what's your number?
Well, it sounds pretty obvious, doesn't it? Can I get the digits? And then you start to think about back to the personal concentration camp and how many men, like my father, my father had a lot of reasons why he said he killed himself in a suicide note, but what he didn't say, and I found out afterwards, was a mountain of debt. And when he looked into the mirror, I say his number was 0, right? Because 0 times anything is nothing. And no matter how much he had, it was never enough because he was never enough. And so you start to think about numbers in a different way. When I was growing up, I was the fat kid, and numbers literally almost crushed me, numbers on a scale, and all of that represents people get into IQ, you get into zip codes, there's just endless amount of numbers, and numbers, as Viktor Frankl said, would reduce a human being literally in the concentration camps, and they reduce individuals. And so it challenges us to think about how are we imprisoned by our numbers and what's our number?
I thought that was such a powerful awareness for me, and sort of an insight for me too. The numbers piece is really, really important. Age, all these kinds of things, your net worth, everything. It's just, there's so much to it, so much heaviness to that.
I just counseled a woman who doesn't have a child and her number is 0, and she looks at her friends who have 1, 2, or 3. She sees the world through that number, and we're just working on, can you break free from the number?
Yeah. Last question, which really kind of cracks me up, so you're now, keep in mind, listeners and viewers, we've been at the bar for a while. So now the last question is, how are you getting home?
How are you getting home? That's the magical answer, usually, back in the day. But in this case, it's much deeper question, as they all are, and it's ultimately like home to the guy in the glass, to the man or woman staring back, to your true self. And I'm not giving too much away, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to love. When I was a rabbi, I did 500 funerals. Many of them were uber successful on the outside, but they weren't successful on the inside because they didn't have, or they didn't give, or they didn't receive enough love.
Can you just say a little bit more, B? Because I can imagine that most of the listeners, many of the listeners, really don't understand this idea of coming home to yourself.
Yeah, again, my grandfather gave me that poem, The Guy in the Glass, when I was a young man in my 20s, just heading down the wrong path, and in his wise way. By the way, he carried this poem with him through World War II. It was very important to him, and it was on his nursing home wall when he died. So it has a lot of meaning for me, but one of which was he was calling me back to the mirror, right? The reckoning, the accounting. Like, yeah, you can go down this path and you can have all, it says in the poem, you can get pats on the back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the guy in the glass. And I have sat with so many men people at the end of their life, in their deathbeds, and you just know when you've been with somebody who's cheated the guy or the gal in the glass. And that is, if there's a hell, that's it.
Thank you. I think that brought it right home for everybody. Okay, now I can't let you off the show without talking about, there's so much about what you sprinkle throughout the book that's just raw and intense about you and your own life. But that whole experience of, your deep, dark night in the woods is really powerful. If you want to, however you want to situate setting that up and what that was about and what you got from that. And maybe before you went into it, why are you fighting with your wife in the first place? What were you struggling with?
For me, it came down to my title. My name was not B or Baruch, it was Rabbi. There are certain professions that come at a cost, and I think clergy is one of them, not the only one. And no matter how hard I tried, it's not what I did, it's who I was. And I started to believe my own bullshit. I was Rabbi B. That was the stage name, the persona. And I lost myself. Literally, I'd go to the mirror and I just didn't recognize myself anymore. And this was, over a 15-year period when I was a congregational rabbi. And I just got to this place where I knew if I did not get out from under this mask, this persona, I would be my family's number 3. I would kill myself. And so, long story short, I ended up in the woods by myself, and I wrestled till the break of dawn. And I likened it for me to Jacob in the Bible, who wrestles through the dark night, and he's transformed on the other side of it. And his name has changed, he's changed, but he limps forever because a lot of wounds, a lot of damage, and it doesn't go away. But, I started to take responsibility for it, change who I was, or maybe return to who I was, the guy in the glass. And that was sort of the catalyst for the next chapter of my life.
I want to dig down into a couple of things there, B. So one, like I said, I learned things about you in your book that I didn't know, and I've known you for several years. And one of them was, you were profoundly successful as a rabbi. You were well paid, well compensated. I was amazed to hear that some of the congregants would just simply send, new cars would show up in your driveway. I mean, I can't even imagine that kind of a life, and what it takes to walk away from that kind of a life. So part of your experience of going to the woods is, if I remember this correctly, is you got lost too. So that's part of the whole process, is you got lost while you're out there.
Yeah, I mean, what happened in the woods is what happened in my life. I was lost in my darkness and losing my identity, myself. And yeah, I was at the top of my game. I had a lifetime contract. I had a serious compensation package. And again, more than just the money, it was the status, right? And walking away from that, I ended up going out into those dark woods, and that was just the beginning. I didn't have a dark night of the soul. I had a dark decade of the soul. It took me 10 years to work through it. We moved to Israel, to a mountaintop in the Middle East. I barely spoke the language. I couldn't be a rabbi. I was sweeping, literally, I was in a synagogue one day and I was sweeping up, and the rabbi was getting all the accolades. And that was my process of really shedding the mask and getting back to the guy in the glass.
Well, there's so much to learn from that, to be inspired by that, and to relate to that, B. And I just really, one of the many things I appreciate about your book is you really are piercingly raw in it, and which is, I think, the only way that you can really help give access to the readers to, as they struggle through trying to understand and make sense of their own lives and who they are, who's the guy in the glass.
Yeah, when guys come to me, and I don't even call myself a therapist anymore because I'm just so, we just sit and we work together. And I just say, I'm just another banged up brother. And Ram Dass, teacher of mine, said, we're all just here walking each other home. And that doesn't happen when you're a, sage on the stage. And I'm not. I'm just a banged up brother walking other men home.
Well, I appreciate your humility, because like I said, I didn't know about all of this, what you had really walked through to get to where you are. I only knew B as I know B today. So I didn't know about all of this other previous story. Now it makes me even respect you and appreciate you even more, B. So anyway, so let's do this. It would be great in our little bit of time together here. I think our listeners and viewers would really like and benefit from hearing maybe a story or two about someone that you've helped, a man that you've helped through your work. What was he dealing with, and how did the two of you work together, or how did they work together in group, if it was?
Yeah, this one just happened this past month. I met a man named Wally who's late stage dementia, and he's in his 70s, and he's going to be taking his life at some point. And I've spent most of my time, I want to say, trying to talk him out of it, but trying to talk to him about why there's always meaning in life. But I respect a man enough to know that, that's his choice. And we have been digging into his dementia as the most meaningful time of his life. As he said, he is not thinking less, he's feeling more. And he has approached this, and that has been, at first it was a personal concentration camp when he was sentenced to, this for the rest of his life. And over the past few years, not me, but on his own, he has been finding the meaning. And so we're really kind of tying up the loose ends of his life, framing it, capturing it so that it can be a legacy for those who follow after him. I'm proud of the work that we've been doing together in that space. And that is Viktor Frankl 101.
We have time for another if you have another one to share.
That one's hard to follow up, Elise. I don't know.
I know, but you got a lot in your basket. I know that.
Let me say, I've shifted more out of one-on-one counseling and coaching to men's groups.
Mm-hmm.
And our friend, Dr. Daniel Franz, and I and another guy started men's peer groups. You can go to menspeergroups.com, because this work as men has to happen in community. You know, this John Wayne, go it alone, bootstrap mentality is part of what got us into the suicide statistic. And so the only way out, is to bring men together in community and commitment, authenticity, vulnerability, because it's one thing to do it with a therapist or even with your partner, but it's another thing to do it in a community of men. And that has been transformative.
Mm-hmm. My co-author, Dr. Arthur Cyr McCauley, also does group work like that too. And he's, he says, of course, and it's peers. So your peers are helping you also to you find that mirror and see what's in it, kind of thing. And I agree with you. And certainly I can't even imagine how powerful that must be to be able to help those men have real vulnerable conversations in front of each other and with each other.
Yeah, that's transformative. I have seen more men grow because of that than anything else I've ever done in my life.
And I guess I can't help, because I know for me, some of my most fulfilling moments in my work are when the spouse of someone that I've been working with inside companies reaches out and says, I don't know what you're doing, but thank you. Are you getting that kind of communication?
Yes, we get a lot of partners, usually women, not always, who are reaching out to us. And I've done some podcasts with them, just interviewing the transformation in their marriage. I think it's saved a lot of marriages because of the work they're doing, not because of anything we're doing, but that's the nature of it, right? A man doing his own work in a peer context. Nobody tells each other what to do. We just share our experience. And in that process, men are becoming better men.
And so what would be like a couple of other ways that the listeners and viewers would recognize, these improvements, though? So a saved marriage is one. The wife didn't walk out.
One of the things we do in our peer groups is we have a clearing. So you go around the table and you say, Joe, I'm clear with you. Jim, I'm clear with you. John, I'm not clear with you. You didn't email me and that hurt. And learning how to hear hard things and say hard things and not react, because so many men, I know this is shocking, they wall up. They take their ball and they go home, or they come after you, they turn it around. To learn how to hear hard things, say hard things, not react, just hold the space is transformative in the work of men.
Well, B, I'm a fan, and you and I have gotten to work together over the years, and I really tremendously appreciate and respect and applaud what you're doing. I thank you for that, for helping more men become whole and to love themselves again. Thank you for coming back on Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Elise.
We have time for just one takeaway. What would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
Those who have a why can bear almost anyhow, right? Spend as much time on digging into what is my why, and it doesn't have to be static. It can be evolving. It should be evolving, but as much time as you do on anything else, because again, those who have a why can bear almost anyhow.
So incredibly true. And that has certainly allowed me to persevere too through my hard years, for sure, 100%. Listeners and viewers, you are going to definitely want to learn more about Dr. Rabbi Baruch HaLevi and his books, his podcast, and the work he's doing coaching men and in peer groups. You can start by visiting one of his websites. It's just simply B, the letter B, and his last name, HaLevi. So it's BHALEVI.com, BHaLevi.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch a recorded podcast. We were on air with Sherry Jacobs. She's the author of The Unexpected Power of Boundaries and an innovation strategist who helps organizations unlock their creative potential by rethinking boundaries, risks, and leadership. We dove into the 3 key areas of boundaries, voice, and permission she situates in the book to help leaders unlock and unleash more innovation. It was surprisingly very attentive and accessible and useful across the whole organization. Next week, we'll be on the air with Warren Kornblum. He's a former global chief marketing officer and the author of Notes from the Brand Stand, Thoughts on Emotional Branding from Someone Who Has Fought for Customer Attention and Won. You'll be surprised how much of his work and what we talk about can be used to inform and improve employee and customer experience as well. See you then, and let's continue leaning into discovering how to elevate your operating system as a leader and create destination workplaces where legendary business takes place. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.